Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we're gonna dig into something,
Yeah.
something that you might not think is that exciting, but when you look at the numbers,
Yeah.
it's actually a pretty big deal, and that's the whole world of metal powers.
The global metal powder market.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And we've got a recent report here that kind of pulls back the curtain
Okay.
on what's happening in that market.
Interesting. Yeah.
So to kind of set the stage here a little bit,
Sure.
the projection is that in 2025, this market's going to reach about 250 million USD
Wow.
globally.
That's substantial.
Yeah, and here's the real kicker is that by 2033, it's expected to almost double,
Really.
hitting about 13,123.92 million
Wow.
USD.
So that's a pretty significant jump.
Yeah, it works out to a CAGR of 7.70%.
So that's a pretty fast clip.
Yeah. Yeah. So this isn't just a market that's kind of like, slowly growing. This is something
Right.
that's really accelerating.
It seems like something's happening.
Yeah. And there are a couple of key factors that the report points to.
Okay.
First off, we've got the increasing adoption of powder metallurgy.
Right.
And if you're not familiar with that process, it basically allows you to create very complex geometries with minimal material waste.
I see. So it's quite efficient.
Exactly. And that's, a huge cost saver. And you'll see that reflected in a lot of these figures that we talk about.
Okay.
And the second big thing is the rising demand from additive manufacturing or 3D printing.
Oh, sure. Yeah. 3D printing is everywhere these days.
It is. And it's really revolutionizing how we prototype and even produce final parts across a bunch of different industries.
It's a real game changer.
It is. And that immediately tells you why this whole metal powder market matters, right? Because it's very tightly connected to all these cutting-edge production methods.
So it's not just about the powders themselves.
Right.
It's about what you can do with them.
Exactly, and how they're used in these really advanced technologies.
Okay, so tell me, where do things stand today?
So if we want to take a look at kind of a global snapshot of the market for 2025,
Yeah?
North America is really the leader right now. They hold over 40% of the global market share,
Wow.
which works out to roughly $682.50 million USD. So you're seeing a big concentration of activity there.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
North America has been really at the forefront of adopting a lot of these new technologies.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not surprising that they would be leading the pack there.
Okay, so what about the rest of the world?
So Europe comes in second.
Okay.
They've got a little over 30% of the global share, and their market size is projected to be about 102.50 million USD for 2025. And then you've got APAC, the Asia Pacific region, holding about 23% of the share, with a market valued at around 1740.000 million USD.
And they're the ones who are poised for the big growth. Yes. We'll get into that a little bit more when we look at the regional breakdowns. But yeah, their growth rate is really impressive.
Yeah, because even though North America is the biggest right now, things could change pretty quickly if the growth rates are that different.
Absolutely. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out over the next few years.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, moving down the list, South America is sitting at a little over 5% of the global share at 275.50 million USD. The Middle East is around 2% with a market size of 290.000 million USD. And then Africa is holding about 1% of the global share, estimated at 159.50 million USD in 2025.
Okay, so that kind of sets the scene globally.
Right. It gives you an idea of where the consumption and the production are primarily concentrated at this point in time.
Right.
Now, here's another interesting tidbit from the report.
Okay.
Aluminum is actually identified as the fastest growing category within the entire metal powder market.
Really?
Yeah. So that tells you something right there. It does. Yeah. Aluminum is it's lightweight.
Right.
It's corrosion resistant.
Yeah.
So it has a lot of really desirable properties.
And it's being used in more and more things.
Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of points to, a lot of innovation happening in that space.
Okay, so that's the big picture.
Right.
Now let's dig into some specifics.
Okay, so let's start with North America.
All right.
Since they're leading in 2025 with that 2,682.50 million USD figure.
Okay.
And their projected CAGR between 2025 and 2033 is 6.2%.
So still substantial growth.
Yeah.
Even
Definitely.
though they're already the largest.
Right.
It's not like they're slowing down.
No, they're not. They're not slowing down at all.
Okay.
Now, if we dig down into specific countries within North America, the U.S. market in 2025 is estimated to be 216.49 million USD with a CAGR of 6.0%.
Okay.
And the report points to, strong demand coming from their defense, aerospace, and automotive sectors, as well as those advancements that we talked about in powder metallurgy and additive manufacturing. So,
Yeah, those are all big industries in the U.S.
They are, and they're constantly pushing the boundaries of material science.
Exactly. They need the best, and they need the newest.
Exactly. Yeah, now Canada's market in 2025 is a little smaller. It's estimated at 321.90 million USD.
Okay.
But their projected growth rate is actually a little bit higher at 7.0%, and that's linked to their expanding mining and metal refining industries.
Okay, so they have the resources.
They do.
And they're expanding their capacity to use them.
Exactly. Yeah, and they're also seeing an increasing use of metal powders in the clean energy sector and just in general industrial production.
Okay.
And then you've got Mexico with a 2025 market size of 244.11 million USD.
Okay.
And they're looking at a CAGR of 6.7%.
All right, so all three North American economies are growing at a pretty good clip.
They are, yeah. They're all kind of, feeding into each other and benefiting from these technological advancements.
Okay, so taking all that together then, what's really driving the growth in North America?
So, I mean, the report highlights a few things, those advancements in 3D printing, allowing for these really complex, lightweight, high-strength components. The automotive sector is huge.
Sure.
They're using metal powders for everything from EVs to more fuel-efficient, traditional cars.
Yeah, they're trying to lightweight everything.
They are, yeah. Lightweighting is a big deal. And then, of course, you've got aerospace. They always need high-performance alloys.
They do. They always push the limits of materials.
And then on top of all that, you've got government support for innovation, ongoing R&D efforts, and this growing focus on sustainable manufacturing practices.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of factors kind of coming together.
It's a really positive environment with this industry.
Yeah, very much so. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's go across the Atlantic over to Europe.
Got it.
So their market size in 2025 is projected to be 202.50 million USD.
Okay.
And their CAGR from 2025 to 2033 is 6.7%.
All right. So again, a pretty healthy growth rate.
It is very similar to North America in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
They've got a strong manufacturing base. They've got a history of adopting advanced technologies, so they're well positioned.
Kind of starting from scratch.
No.
They're already ahead of the game.
Exactly.
No.
Now, if we break it down by country within Europe, the UK market in 2025 is expected to be 353.22 million USD.
Okay.
With a CAGR of 7.5%.
Okay, so a little bit higher than the overall European average.
It is, and the report attributes that to, strong demand coming from their automotive electronics and aerospace industries.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Big industries for them.
Right, and they've also got some government initiatives that are supporting advanced manufacturing and sustainable materials.
Okay, so they're putting their money where their mouth is?
Yeah, they're definitely invested in this.
Okay.
Now, Germany,
yes,
a real powerhouse when it comes to automotive innovation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Their projected 2025 market size is 416.30 million USD.
Okay.
And a CAGR of 6.9%.
Solid growth.
Yeah. And a lot of that demand is coming from, the need for lightweight materials in vehicles, high-performance engineering applications, and the growing EV sector.
They are really pushing EV technology.
They are, yeah. They're one of the leaders in that space.
All right. And what about the rest of Europe?
So moving on through Europe, France has a market of 193.43 million USD in 2025.
Okay.
With a CAGR of 5.9%. Italy is at 180.82 million USD with a CAGR of 6.1%.
Okay.
Russia's market is estimated at 325.89 million USD with a CAGR of 5.7%. Spain is at 172.41 million.
Okay.
USD with a CAGR of 5.8%. Sweden is at 65.18 million USD with a CAGR of 6.8%.
Yep.
Denmark is at 44.15 million USD with a KG of 6.5%. Switzerland's at 31.54 million USD.
Right.
With a KGR of 6.4%. Luxembourg is at 25.23 million USD with a CAGR of 7.0%.
Wow.
And then the rest of Europe collectively is at 294.35 million USD with a CAGR of 5.4%.
So it's all over the map.
It is, yeah, there's a lot of variation.
Yeah. You have some countries growing really fast and others not so much.
Exactly. Yeah. And that reflects, their different industrial specializations and the different paces at which they're adopting these advanced manufacturing technologies.
It's interesting how the smaller countries sometimes seem to grow faster.
They do.
Maybe they're a little more nimble.
Maybe. So, yeah, maybe they can adapt more quickly.
Yeah. Interesting.
So overall, what's driving the European market? Well, the report points to a few big things.
Okay.
First off, strong legislative support for sustainable materials.
Yeah.
That's a big one in Europe.
Yeah, the EU, really big on sustainability.
They are. You've got high demand from the automotive sector, particularly for lightweight components in EVs.
Sure.
And from aerospace for those high-performance alloys. There's a lot of focus on recyclable powders and eco-friendly production methods.
Which makes sense given their focus on sustainability.
And then they've also got government-backed R&D. And advancements in nanopowders and additive manufacturing.
So they're really investing in the future of the industry.
They are, yeah. So a lot of positive factors there.
All right, so now for the region that we've been waiting for.
Yeah, let's talk about APAC.
The region that's going to see the biggest jump.
Yeah, so their market size in 2025 is projected to be 1740.000 million USD.
Okay.
But here's the really inclusive part is their CAGR from 2025 to 2033 is 10.4%.
Wow.
It's way higher than North America or Europe.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the highest growth rate that we're seeing globally.
Yeah.
So that tells you something right there. Yeah. It sounds like there's a real shift in momentum happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Now, China is the dominant player in the APAC market.
Sure.
They've got a projected 2025 size of 730.80 million USD.
Okay.
And a CAGR of 9.9%.
Still really strong growth.
It is, yeah. And that's being driven by, their rapid industrial expansion, the booming electronics sector.
Yeah, makes sense.
And all this investment that they're making in battery technology for EVs.
Right.
And 3D printing capabilities.
They've become a real manufacturing powerhouse.
They have, yeah. They're really leading the way in a lot of those areas.
Okay.
Now, Japan's 2025 market is estimated at 240.12 million USD, with a CAGR of 8.9%.
Okay.
South Korea is projected to be 208.80 million USD, with a CAGR of 9.5%.
Okay.
But then you get to India, and they're really standing out here. They've got a 2025 market size of 174.00 million USD.
Okay.
And the highest country-specific growth rate at 12.3%.
Wow.
So they're really taking off.
Yeah, 12.3%. That's huge.
And that growth is coming from increased investment in both powder metallurgy and additive manufacturing, as well as expansion in their automotive construction and defense sectors.
Okay, so it's across the board.
Yeah, it really is.
It's not just one industry.
No, it's not. And that 12.3% CAGR is really impressive.
It's really something.
Yeah.
Okay, and the rest of APAC?
So elsewhere in the region, you've got Australia's market at 90.48 million USD in 2025.
Okay.
With a CAGR of 9.7%. Singapore is at 34.80 million USD. With a CAGR of 10.7%, Taiwan is at 67.86 million USD. With a CAGR of 10.2%, Southeast Asia as a whole is at 114.30 USD, with a CAGR of 11.2%.
Wow.
And the rest of APAC is at 78.30 million USD, with a CAGR of 10.2%.
So it's really the whole region.
Yeah. It is. It's really impressive growth across the board.
Experiencing that huge growth.
Yeah. Now, what's driving all of this? Well, the report points to a few big things.
Right.
Rapid industrialization across a ton of different sectors.
Okay.
You've got a huge increase in electric vehicle production throughout the region.
Right.
And a constantly expanding electronics manufacturing base.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, there's a high demand for high-performance metal powders in both consumer electronics and the automotive industry.
Yeah, those are big consumers of materials.
They are.
Yeah.
And specifically, the EV sector is driving demand for copper, nickel, and aluminum powders, while the electronic sector is using powders for packaging.
All right.
Circuit boards, conductive inks, you name it.
So it's a really diverse range of applications.
It is, yeah. And then you've also got government support for 3D printing, powder metallurgy, and advanced manufacturing in general. So
they're investing in the future of these industries.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
So that's APAC. Now let's move on to South America.
Right.
So their projected market size for 2025 is 275.50 million USD,
Okay.
with an anticipated CAGR of 8.4%.
Okay. So, well, it's smaller than North America, Europe, and APAC. It's still growing.
It's not a small growth rate by any means.
Right. Exactly.
Now, Brazil is the leading country in South America.
Right.
Their projected 2025 market size is 117.91 million USD,
Okay.
with a CAGR of 9.0%.
Solid growth.
And that growth is coming from,
Yeah.
expanding infrastructure projects,
All right.
industrialization,
Makes sense.
and increasing automotive production.
All big drivers of demand.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are all driving demand for iron, steel, and aluminum powders.
Right.
Argentina's market is estimated at 46.28 million USD, with a TGR of 9.3%.
Okay.
Again, linked to increased activity in their mining, manufacturing, and auto production sectors.
Okay, so they're on a similar trajectory to
Yeah.
Brazil.
Yeah. Then you've got Colombia at 24.52 million USD, with a TGR of 8.2%. Peru at 22.59 million USD, with a KGR of 8.6%.
Okay.
Chile at 19.84 million USD, with a KGR of 8.7%. And the rest of South America combined at 44.36 million USD, with a KGR of 7.5%.
So it seems like Brazil and Argentina are the real leaders.
Yeah, they're definitely leading the way in that region. Now, what are the overall drivers? Well, the report highlights a few key things.
Okay.
Significant investment in infrastructure development, the automotive sector, and the mining industry.
Okay.
And of course, their natural resources are a big plus.
They have a lot of the raw materials.
They do. Yeah. They're very well positioned in that regard.
Yeah.
So their abundance of natural resources provides a strong base for the production of these key metal powders like iron, steel, copper. The automotive sector is adopting powder metallurgy and metal injection molding more and more.
Yeah, that's a key technology for them.
It is, yeah. And those infrastructure projects are driving the demand for high-strength metal powders.
Sure.
And on top of that, you've got government programs and foreign investment.
Okay, so there's a lot of support for the industry.
Yeah, very much so. Now let's shift our focus over to the Middle East.
Okay.
Their projected 2025 market size is 290.00 million USD.
Okay.
With an anticipated CGR of 9.0%.
Okay, so they're also growing at a good clip.
Yeah, and they've got their own unique set of dynamics.
Right, it's a very different region than the others we've talked about.
Now, Qatar's market in 2025 is estimated at 23.20 million USD, with a KGR of 8.5%.
Okay.
And a lot of that demand is coming from, their need for high-performance powders in oil and gas.
Of course.
Aerospace and defense.
Big industries for them.
Exactly. Yeah. Saudi Arabia has a much larger market at 102.08 million USD, with a KGR of 9.3%.
Okay.
Turkey and the UAE have projected 2025 market sizes of 23.20 million USD and 59.74 million USD, respectively.
Okay.
And they're looking at KGRs of 9.6% and 9.5%.
Right.
And it's worth noting that Turkey is seeing an increasing use of metal injection molding and 3D printing.
Okay, so they're embracing those technologies.
They are, yeah. Now, Egypt's market is 17.40 USD with a KGR of 8.8%.
Okay.
And the rest of the Middle East combined is at 64.38 million USD with a KGR of 8.2%.
So good mix of growth rates.
Yeah. Yeah, very much dependent on the specific countries and their specific industries.
Yeah, each country has its own unique set of circumstances.
And now the big drivers in the Middle East seem to be the ongoing expansion in the oil and gas sector, the adoption of 3D printing, and then this big investment in their defense industries.
Right.
So increased government spending on military applications is a big deal there.
Yeah, that's a major factor for them.
And then the oil and gas industry, of course, needs corrosion-resistant products.
Sure, they're operating in pretty harsh environments.
Right, exactly.
So they need materials that can hold up.
Yeah, and they're also adopting 3D printing for some specialized industrial and medical applications. And then there's this broader trend of economic diversification and investment in regional manufacturing capabilities.
So they're not just relying on oil and gas anymore.
No, they're trying to broaden their horizons.
Yeah, it makes sense to diversify.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so we've covered most of the globe now.
Yeah, let's wrap up with Africa.
Okay.
So their 2025 market size is projected to be 159.50 million USD.
Okay.
With a KGR of 8.0%.
All right, so again, smaller than some of the others,
Yeah.
but still respectable growth.
It is, yeah. And the potential there is huge as they continue to industrialize.
Exactly. They have a lot of room to grow.
They do.
Yeah.
Now, Nigeria's market in 2025
Okay.
is projected at 12.76 million USD with a CAGR of 8.2%. And that's being driven by increased investment in local mining and manufacturing, as well as broader industrialization and infrastructure development.
So they're building up their industrial base.
They are, yeah.
Okay.
South Africa has a larger market at 56.14 million USD with a CAGR of 8.9%.
Okay.
They're seeing increased demand in automotive and defense, as well as growth in mining construction and industrial manufacturing.
So they're a bit more developed than Nigeria.
They are, yeah.
In terms of their industry.
Right. And then the rest of Africa combined is projected at 90.60 million USD with a CGR of 7.2%.
All right, so there's a lot of variation within Africa as well.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Now, the overall drivers in Africa, there's a few key things: the expansion of mining operations, general industrial growth across the board, increased construction driven by urbanization and infrastructure development.
Right, that makes sense.
The manufacturing and automotive sectors are starting to adopt powder metallurgy.
Okay.
And Africa has a lot of natural resources.
Right, so they have the raw materials needed.
Yeah, which is a big plus. And then on top of that, you've got government initiatives focused on local manufacturing and economic diversification.
So they're trying to build up their own industries.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered all the regions now.
Yeah, we've done a pretty thorough world tour here.
Let's zoom out again and look at the big picture.
Yeah, so what are the big takeaways? What are the overarching market forces that are really shaping things globally?
Okay.
Well, the report highlights a few key drivers.
Right.
The continued growth of automobile industry is a big one, and particularly the increasing popularity of EVs.
Sure.
That's really requiring manufacturers to think differently about materials.
Yeah, EVs are changing everything.
They are. They're really shaking things up.
Yeah.
Now, another big driver is the advancement in nanopowder technology. And these nanopowders are incredibly tiny.
Thousands of times smaller than a human hair.
Yeah. And they're leading to all sorts of new applications and enhanced performance.
Right. They have these unique properties because they're so small.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then finally, you've got the growing use of energy storage devices.
Okay. Like batteries.
Yeah, batteries, fuel cells, things like that. And those are creating demand for specific types of metal powders.
Yes, they need materials with the right electrochemical product.
Exactly. Now, it's not all just straightforward growth.
Sure.
The report also points to some factors that are acting as restraints.
Yep.
One of those is the high price of metal powders.
Right. I mean, they are advanced materials.
Yeah.
So